Special event to close the Thursday of what's been a really brilliant and exciting summer school full of different events and writing challenges, I know, across genres. And welcome to everyone joining us online as well. My name's Andrew McMillan. I'm Professor of Contemporary Writing here at Manchester Metropolitan University. For those of us that haven't been to the library before, maybe you're kind of joining us on campus for the first time as a distance learner or just new to the university, welcome to the Poetry Library. This is the only poetry library in the UK that's attached to a university. It's a fantastic resource and piece of research infrastructure that we have here. It's open to anybody, so to students, to members of the public. So if it is that you are a member of the public and not a student, do join and feel free to wander the stacks and the shelves after tonight's event and have a little explore. Amongst the stacks and the shelves, you'll notice some art and some papers and some notes, and these are part of an exhibition that Jean Sprackland has curated based on her latest collection, Goyle, Churt and Mayev, the front cover of which is this magnificent photo behind me. And you'll find throughout the stacks and throughout the library handwritten notes of Jean's towards that collection, photographs that she took making the collection. You'll even find in this corner what I'm assured is a toxic log, which is why it's in a glass case. I'm assured that it's not toxic to humans, it's just toxic to other logs, which is why it's in a glass case. So approach that with care. If you do. And so welcome to this thrilling event tonight that I'm really pleased and honoured to be introducing and to be joining in this evening. We've got two of our very best and most important, I think, poetic voices in the globe writing today. We've got the brilliant Tishani Doshi, and we've got the absolutely wonderful Annemarie joining us this evening to come together for this fantastic night of poetry. The way that tonight will work is that we're going to hear first of all from Annemarie, and then we're going to hear from Tishani, who I'll come up and introduce after Annemarie finishes speaking. We'll then have a little bit of discussion between the three of us, and then we'll come out to the audience for the always traditional audience Q&A and that chance to ask a couple of questions. And then we'll all rush to the back of the room to buy copies of Tishani and Annemarie's latest collections. It's a lock-in. Nobody's allowed to leave until all the books have sold out, I am assured. Red at the back from Blackwell's will be selling copies of Tishani's book. I, through the magic of various instruments, will be selling copies of Anne-Marie's book on her behalf, and they'll both be, hopefully, willing to sign copies as well. Annemarie is a poet who I have long admired and is published by Gallery Press, who, if that's a press that we're less familiar with here in the UK, we shouldn't be. They publish just the most incisive and brilliant poetry, both in Ireland and of the world. Other books of Anne-Marie's include Bloodrot, that Dwyer Press, another fantastic press, published, and The Poison Glen, which was shortlisted for the Ledbury Helens Poetry Prize as well. She received Arts Council Next Generation Artist Award, amongst others, as well as the Patrick Kavanagh Fellowship, and he's poetry editor of Stinging Fly magazine, which is a fantastic magazine, one of the first places that ever published me, in fact, but we shouldn't hold that against them. They publish much better poets as well. Within Anne-Marie's work, there is just this force of energy and power in which these, I think, the natural world, the body, what it is to be human, is transformed and transmogrified into the spiritual and ecological world within which these poems are set. And it's going to be a real treat to hear Annemarie read these poems. So please do welcome to the stage Annemarie Churreáin.
Thank you, Andrew. Good evening, Aharja, Moradív. It's my first time reading in Manchester, and a real thrill to be reading with Tishani, whose work has been kind of like a wellspring for me as I was writing this new collection of poems. Hymn to All the Restless Girls, it's a kind of song, a praise song for the restless girls of my family and Irish community. And it's a love song to the searchers and the dreamers and the troublemakers who came of age in difficult historical times and found themselves on a quest between worlds. So I will start with a strange little poem, which is titled Ban Shanchas. And Ban Shanchas is a Gaelic word meaning women's lore. Sister, let me scatter salt at your door. Let me ward off the moon falling through the forest in her nightdress and boots, hair in her eyes and December ice in her throat. Moon whose journal reads, last night a fox came to smell the flock. Fox, not wolf. The bad luck around here keeps swapping hoods. See this lake spit of the honeysuckle vines, or the fog like burst milk. Every push and pull reminds me of, is that shaking I hear inside the stables? The last girl to go missing in this cove was found under the cliffs at Three Castle Head. And it frightens me that her snow lace gown has become a fable. No wolves left in Ireland, they say. Only eyes red as cinder, tufts of feathery ash, and this blood wind howling over a southwest gable. Thank you. So I wanted to remember the thousands of restless girls who were sent to Irish church and state institutions, places like orphanages and industrial schools. And my grandmother was a restless girl who was sent to a mother and baby home in 1951. And she had her head shaved and her name taken and her clothes taken and her child taken. And the psychic wound of those events, it still kind of ripples today. Inside history. Rage not stars that they tried to unwitch my body, that they tried to rid my body of orchids and pines, that my body became a thing that is not a river, that I was touched as if I was not a source. That my tongue bled, that I was living in a state of tread softly, that I did not bathe among speckled trout, that I did not rip the sink out of the wall, that I ripped all the walls out of the house, that I called out, forgive me, Father, that I saw my name shadowed in stone, that I turned my stone face like a shadow to the sun, that by sunrise a mink had been inside the coop, that the hot stink of coop was inside my head, that my cheek was stuffed with wire and thorn, that my neck was broken, that I opened my mouth and nothing came out. So I have lots of poems for my beloved grandmother and for these women who endured and survived and outlived the Catholic mother and baby homes and those Irish institutions. But here is a poem for the seldom mentioned men. The home for unmarried fathers was sketched up on stiff white paper. Wings, dormitories, double tubs in the washroom where bad wee articles could be dunked two at a time. Messers, runners, fancy lads from around the town could be hauled in by the lorry load, bold-faced and hissing, chests half puffed like ruined scones. No liquor, no card games, no dancing, no leaving until the mother debt is paid. The rules to be read on admission, slacks, shirts, socks to be swapped for a clay uniform, clean skulls, clean chins, a new name, Peter or Paul. All morning horns to be doused twice and then a clot of thin porridge before the day's labour in the laundry pit. Sheets in one pile, clay underpants in another, sorting, hauling, rinsing, steam pressing folds, a new electric pump and well to fill the sinks with carbolic suds, enough to rub the sheen from Lucifer, and each Sunday a sermon to shame the living daylights out of them, hair shirted and kneeling, hands drawn together, like two shook halves of a hollowed moon, until finally each man might give in to his blood child, his seed child, out there somewhere beneath the wan stars, or worse, nowhere. The home sketched up was never built, and the bunks where men might lay awake at night, silent as candles, never installed, because who would wish that penance on anyone? So in Ireland, women who work with magic, they've always been a bit feared by church and state. And so there's been a lovely kind of gleeful reclamation in working with invocations and chants and charms and keens and cures and that kind of thing. It's amazing to me that kind of after all the brutality that we've experienced in Ireland by church and state and also by colonisation, that this kind of inclination towards the other world and magic has, well, it's never left Irish women. And I'll read this poem, which is kind of a found poem. It's the words of a teenage girl who gave a testimony about a vision that she had in Sligo in 1985. On Monday night last, Diane was here from England. You could see an unusual mist falling. We were in the road when I looked up and I saw clouds parting like smoke. I saw the face of Our Lady in the moon. Angels swirling at her head, swaying from the waist up. I felt a heat rising through my body, frozen. I could not move. I was drowning in the scent of her roses. I was afraid. I was overcome by her lips moving to the words faith and hope. I was all alone. I reached out to touch Diane, and we could see the Lord forming in the sky. We were singing, Hail, Queen of Heaven. We were covered in a shining light. Our mothers saw a strange star that night. A cameraman saw it too, but the camera saw nothing. It all happened at 9:20. We thought, who is going to believe us? Teenage girls are very impressive with their ability to imagine their way out of tricky situations. So I'm also really fascinated by the role of ceremony in Irish culture and by the space the natural world has always given us for ceremony. And at one time, it would have been customary for Irish high kings to marry the land as a part of their inauguration. And I was really kind of taken by that. And in thinking about, I suppose, reclaiming native tradition and rerouting ourselves as a country, I think there's something really interesting about looking to the natural world. So this poem is written for my friend Lucy, who is my teacher in that area. And she enlisted all of her friends and her community to help her make her wedding dress out of salmon skins and deer skins. And it was the most beautiful dress that I have ever seen. Wedding dress for a restless girl. Step inside this deerskin skirt and let me zip you up among the snowy pleats, soft as rainwater and gathered by herders in the mountains of Norway and Ireland, this killing and honouring. For you, this waistcoat of 7 salmons, sequins of silt tanned in a bath of willow and oak and stretched over iridescent fires. For you, these stockings chickweed trimmed and initialed along the rim with your mother's name. The shoes by Ascan, queerling of the river. Eel good for shimmering, good for slithering through tricky shallows should you meet them. I am ushering you inside this cloak of peat smoke and stars, lined with cotton grass and spilling feathers along collar, cuffs and hood. The sex seed has been stitched inside an invisible seam. Seed of making, seed of light. On your first morning as wife, you must gift your bed linen to the next girl who will save the seed for her dress. Here, take this ram's wool and weave it like a prayer at your throat. It will keep you, and slip your hands into these kid gloves. The sticks wait to be kindled, the heathers lit. Welcome, nettle, hawthorn, hazelnut. It is after midnight, and here let me pin this yarrow behind your ear. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so beautiful, Annemarie. It's lovely to be here. Oh, Andrew, did you want to do anything? Intro? You don't have to, but okay. All right.
I insist on having my moment in the limelight. But thank you so much, Annemarie. That was an astonishing and moving reading. And as Tishani already introduced herself, now I feel superfluous, but I will try anyway. We're here with Annemarie, with Tishani's 5th collection, Egrets While War. And I think the reason why this is such an exciting pairing of poets with Annemarie is that so much of what we heard there in Annemarie's work, the way that history, the way the female body, the way that ecology in the world come into conversation with each other are the qualities that have always run through the lyric heart of clarity that echoes through Tishani's work as well. There is also, I will say, a poem, I think, in Egrets While War that was written while Tishani was our international poet in residence last year, during which she visited Manchester Museum, and one of the things that she saw there formed the basis for one of the poems here, and it was magical to have her here with us last year for a week. It's brilliant to have her here for even if it's just for an evening. So please welcome back to the lectern Tishani Doshi.
Thank you. Egrets While War. In the garden, egrets are doing their stalking dance. And it's easy to see how they are really feathered dinosaurs flown in through a hole from the past. Somewhere, a city under siege remains sleepless. The dirge of loss, recovery, loss, loss, loss continues. I cannot say why other people's family portraits fill me with such astonishing longing. Ancestors who stepped from ocean to land, shedding fin, tail, gill, to transform into a symphony of great aunts and uncles. We bury clues of our dispossession, bony plated language, heart scarab. Our task is to march on, to rise and leave the apple orchard, throw stones at marauders who threaten to tear up the carpets. Father will file a missing person report while spring carries on with its hedonism. It is pointless to resist the pull of our fruiting bodies. Whatever we fear has already happened, will keep happening. If we could just wake to fullness in a delta with the berry red lips of an amorous god upon us, climb trees to listen to heartbeats. But here, the earth remains leashed to mystery, clay fingerprint, fragment of jaw. The sea retracts her tongue like a warning. Winged creatures lurch and soar. Whiteness, then vanishing. Thank you. So that title poem came from watching the cattle egrets in my garden. I live on the coast on southeast India, and there was something so prehistoric about looking at these birds and their dinosaur-like movements and their relation to the deep past that I think began to fascinate me and inform a lot of the poems in the collection, which, as it suggests, there's a sort of hinge, the comma, the egrets. There's lots of birds in this book, but I also started writing these poems coming out of COVID, when there had been an idea of coming into a changed and transformed world in a more optimistic way. Arundhati Roy had said the pandemic is a portal. There was this sense that we had experienced this existential crisis together and that we would come out into something more hopeful. And I think what we find is that we are in conflict and war and war and war. So the poems veer between love poems and war poems, and I'll try to do a mix of both today. This next one is called Poem for a Stranger in a Time of War. We left the city and found at the gates a prescription with your name on it. We took the metro to the beach, and on the shore we saw a row of your teeth. Dear stranger, it was so nice before the war. We read letters at the breakfast table while one of us stood with a bayonet at the door. Now we are forced into uniforms while some of us die on beds of arrows. The cafes are deserted, but from the trenches we can still hear David Bowie sing Never Let Me Down, and it's 1987. I'm curious, did you ever have a mustache? Did you stop believing love would arrive like a grand railway collision? Dear stranger, we may be fighting cousins, but try to remember a time of happiness in the garden, say, with the sweetness of pomegranate bursting in your throat, all your dogs on the grass, even the lost ones, panting with the hard breath of a morning walk, or a late February evening with your father banging kitchen vessels all the way down the street to chase out winter and welcome spring, sounding the air with tiny detonations. You were a child, how the world filled you then, how it fills you now, whispering from behind the line of silver birches, just get out, just go. I have robbed these memories and I give them to you. Take them. They may save your life. So this is a poem that I wrote here after looking at being in Manchester for a week, and I started to get obsessed with the dodo after seeing the remains of the dodo bones in the drawer here, and then I went to the chantry, and I'd been reading about, I was thinking about what might the sound of this bird be, and one of the theories is, forgive me, I'm going to make a dodo impression in this reading. But the idea is that because it was in the pigeon family, it had this sort of, a cooing noise like the pigeon, but also that the name dodo came from possibly an onomatopoeic, you know what I mean? It sounds like it, and so the do is because that's what the sound it made. So anyway, this is, and also happened to be when there was a skirmish going on. There had been a slight skirmish between India and Pakistan. So this is Sonnet for the Dodo, written jet-lagged in Manchester as India and Pakistan threaten war. Tonight, the clock outside my window stills, and I am soft and earthbound, moving through the forest, ground nesting and flightless, filled with fevered solitude. In the prelude to your vanishing, was it dark, then cold, then dark like this? Did you feel your feet amiss, a country that used to be a home, unfolding? Bombs, drones, tonight a flower moon in this Mancunian sky, imaginary chaffinch sounding war. What is this failure to endure? Despite the sturdy kneecaps, hearts give in, blackout, extinction, bones in a museum drawer. I thought I heard you singing in the chantry, do, do, do. How could you know you were the last you on earth? I'll read, I will read a poem. Okay. So a love poem of sorts. This is a concrete poem and it's in the shape of a moth, and it is called Perimenopausal Desire as Fruit-Sucking Pink Underwing Moth. Here in the vast plains of midlife, no one says much about being fruitful anymore. The only thing multiplying is the fog as it coasts through my bog-brown body, saying goodbye to Mesdames ovaries. I watch the sun drain out of the sky, and some days it's all hot larval flash, but mostly it recalls the ignominious hurry of water from a bath. I still can't define what consciousness is, but I know there's a bed in which it lies, mind as river, as bedrock, as memory foam, which explains my ambivalence to camping. The few times I've laid against the ground, hoping to feel something push back, has yielded a kind of terror, empires of bone, holocaust of plastic. But oh, the earth pushed back, which in sandpit psychology means she must like me. Behind every desire lurks loneliness. Iron filing seeks north-facing magnet, push. Even the invisible particles of radioactive matter push, push, quietly settling their malice in our teeth. Love, it is January, and the rice fields on the outskirts of the city are staging revolt with their turrets of green. The sand on the beach is a radiance. When you come to me under the covers, startling my underwings open, I am spun into stupefaction, burst from casing of silk and leaf. I, so used to seeking, pinked, fruited, tongued, to fever pitch vanishing. I love that you have so many mentions of grandmothers in your poems. When I was in graduate school, I had a bit of a snobby mentor who banned grandmother poems essentially and said, no grandmother poems. I'm not sure the reason behind it. I think maybe, you know, going into a kind of trope of sentimentality, or I don't know what. But anyway, I'm going to read a grandmother poem. This is a poem also about, I guess, looking at the images of children waiting in line for food, and thinking about the privilege of having had an abundant childhood myself. And it happens to be the season of mangoes at the moment, so this poem also features, and you can't eat a mango in an elegant way. You eat it, over the sink. So yeah, this is called Tamil Nadu Summer Obad. Heat slides under doors at dawn, and I am almost a child again, sitting on the kitchen floor of my grandparents' house in Madras. My cousins and I skinning mangoes on steel plates, vegetarian brutes sucking the sun-gold flesh around fatty stones. The person I was inside that house is gone. Grandparents gone. The house some kind of clothing store. Summers stack up one against the other. I keep a photo of my grandmother in the bathroom. Sacrilege, I know, to house an ancestor there. But she used to pour waterfalls over our heads, slip silver coins into our palms, as though all of this could be never ending. What to say to those raised without childhoods, the dread of waking to the taps dry, the bucket underneath, famished. Thank you. And I'll end with the poem that, so I have so many birds in this collection. I've somehow become the mad bird lady. From the birds that I notice in my gardens, kingfishers and orioles and crows and egrets and peacocks, to birds that are extinct, like the dodo. I have a sonnet for the passenger pigeon, Martha, who was the last passenger pigeon, and George, who was her cage mate. I have mythical birds, the birds from the Ramayana, and an albatross, which gives a nod to the rhyme of the ancient mariner. So there are many, many birds in this collection, partly, I think, because they represent this connection to deep time, but also connection to the ground and the sky, and offer that winged lightness. So this final poem, which has me contemplating some ideas about how language may have begun, features a lapwing. And I don't know if any of you've heard a lapwing, but it has this really distressed kind of sound. It's a kind of screech. And I was listening to this at night and thinking about the origins of why we would need to screech. So this is a theory on the origin of language. Last night, after months away from home, a lapwing piercing the still, dark still with its warnings. Language perhaps began like this: a campfire, one person to keep watch, who would have needed something to sound danger. A word like tiger, airstrike, run. And once the words entered, they were unstoppable, dragging dirt into the hallways of our brains, pitching tents to watch sunsets over the graying swamp. We had learned by then to make cleavers and picks, tools to carve the scavenged flesh of bison and mammoth, language and violence proceeding together. It was only later, in the flowering, armed with lorgnettes in the garden, that we could say things like, "Go and give the ass a drink of wine to wash down the figs," or "We'll spend time preening after copulation." When we lie down, you and I, our backs against the scrape of ground in this rain-fed open country, all the shrapnel burst horrors of the year, unable to be named, and so unable to pass from plowed fields of heart to limb to throat. We let go, lift our legs to the sky as though they could hold up the heavens. In Armenian, a way to say "I love you" is "I want to eat your liver." In Arabic, "I want you to bury me. I want you to walk on my eyelashes. Feel the retreat of thick sea ice collapse across our bodies." The ancestors of lapwing, they had feathers for 1,000,000 years before ever using them to fly. Our tongues, monarchs in the cradles of our mouths, now scream, now sing.
Thank you so much, Tishani, and to you both for such remarkable readings. And I think one of the things that struck me as I was listening to both these readings and reflecting on the books that I'd read before tonight is the kind of three-dimensionality of both your work, like the ways in which you're able, as I was saying in my introductions, to draw on contemporary politics, the body politic, to draw on ecology, to draw on the natural world, to draw on mythology and folklore and all the maternal lineage and all these things that are in themselves deeply complex individually come to be in conversation in individual poems. And I was thinking about, we have a lot of our students in the room and a lot of people who are on their own writing journeys. And so I thought I'd start off with always that impossible question for both of you of where the work begins for you. Because I think what I so admire in both your work is as I'm saying, the complexity, the three-dimensionality of the work, the fact that each poem that we heard from both of you feels like its own complete world. And so often, as a writer, we sit down at the desk or we sit on the train and we have the blank page. And how is it that I'm asking for myself really, how is it I get from there to the complexity and brilliance of what you are both able to construct? Is there an entry point that you always go back to, I guess?
Okay. Thanks, Andrew. That's an impossible question. But I think partly, the mystery of where poems begin, it's nice for it to remain a mystery. But I feel the image is a very strong trigger to begin something that stays in the subconscious, and then the poem is built around image somehow. But also I've been endlessly inspired by, current news items. And I think there's a sense, at least in this collection for me, of trying to hold many time zones in one. So I wanted very much to return to the idea of, universal, timeless, lyric love poems standing above time in a way. But then you would read the news or you'd look at the phone and there were all these things coming in. So I think then you just kind of push them together. And so I have a poem for Jeff Bezos goes off to space, and then I have I have a poem about a sex bot, and I have a poem about many poems about the many wars and conflicts. And then I have poems about great-grandmothers and grandmothers and loves and imaginary, strangers. And I think in a way, the poem is capacious, and it allows you to bring together juxtapositions that can't normally exist. But also it can really hold all that time. It can jump from a prehistoric deep time into the current time, and in a way allows you to be able to hold all of it in the poem, which is really quite a powerful thing, I think.
Yeah, that really is an impossible question, isn't it? How do you get from the blank page to did you say a three-dimensional poem? A lot of tearing your hair out, a lot of pizza boxes, some tears, self-doubt. I don't know, I suppose it kind of feels natural to me to want to wander between worlds. And maybe that's the case for a lot of people. I think it's quite dangerous to fall into an idea that like progress in a poem or a book or a creative practice has to be kind of linear, and that we always have to be leaving the past behind and trying something completely different. And I'm more interested in the relationship between people in my poems and in relationships. And there's a lovely word in the Gaelic language to talk about your sense of identity or your sense of self. The word is dúchas. And your dúchas is your sense of self as it has been informed, not just by language, but also by place, by your community, your relationships with the natural world, the other world, the ancestors. All of that kind of soup is acknowledged, as being formative for your voice and your soul. And I probably, when I started writing, thought, I have to pick a subject, and I'm going to write about landscape. I'm going to write about history. And now I love the breadth and air and what you were talking about, kind of wandering between subjects and topics, and trusting that there is a relationship between history and mythology and folklore and family that will come into focus.
I think that feels like such an important point for us to just kind of rest on for a minute and to remind everyone of. I think that sense, I think particularly again when we first starting out, I remember this pressure of kind of what's your subject? What's going to be the thing that you're going to write about? What's your kind of USP? But as you say, the kind of the capaciousness to be able to wander, and not even just wander, but to connect as you do these kind of what might be kind of disparate subjects together in the world of the poem, that becomes the work of it, I suppose. And I wanted to ask, Tishani's used a couple of times this phrase deep time. And again, what really strikes me, and I think struck all of us across both those readings, was the sense in which we're both in conversation with history, deeply in conversation with the present moment, and deeply in conversation, as you were just saying there, Annemarie, this ability to step between different worlds. And I wonder, again, I'm a fan of asking impossible questions, kind of as you sit down to write these poems or as you read them out to us as the audience, kind of what is your relationship to that sense of time? Do these poems feel like historical excavations? Do they feel like attempts to hold time in place and to kind of memorialize? Or do they feel like ways of kind of capturing the eternal movement to the present time, I guess? I guess there's a deep sense, I guess what I'm saying is there's a deep sense of history, but of the utterly contemporary in both your work, I think.
Well, certainly I have been drawn to history, such a strange word, history. And thinking about the way, for example, in Ireland, our state histories have not always had space for the stories of, women and children. So that, you know, then brought me into folkloric histories or folkloric time, where, you know, our folklore archives and our folklore rituals and practices, they are actually a kind of sense of time through the eyes of women and children often. And certainly if you go into folk magic and curing and, you know, folk medicine, well, that's time, you know, that's a kind of female time that I feel I'm stepping into as well. So I don't know if, like, I think of a poem really as a kind of magical space. You know, it's a sacred space that I go into, and I'm drawing upon the gaps and erasures in history, and I'm drawing upon folkloric ritual, and I'm drawing upon these mythical stories that I grew up of Balor of the Evil Eye, who was a giant with one eye and one arm and one leg, and you know, I kind of grew up around that. But once you open the door to the poem and you go in, you, as you said, you have to let the mysterious happen, and maybe you do have to let go of ordinary time, you know, and just trust you're in a kind of mythical time then, aren't you? You know?
Yeah, I think that also the relationship to writing and time is really interesting. I write fiction and poetry, and I think when I've been working on a novel, there is a very strange, you at one point excuse yourself from real life to go into the tunnel of this thing that you're writing, and it takes so long to write a novel, and there is always a strange gap as a writer. I think the intensity of writing these poems has passed me now, but now I have to speak about them when I'm thinking about something else. I'm in a different time now, but I have to keep coming back to the poems. So I think we're always struggling in a way to figure out this, you know, which time zone we are in. But I do think that, you know, because I live mostly in India, that the relationship to time is different in different cultures. And there is a very cyclical idea of time, and it is not linear. And so there is the possibility for many things to happen all at once, and for it to be repeated, and you know, the on and on and on, which is really dizzying and wonderful to kind of dip into. But I think, you know, one of my favorite quotes is Charles Simic, who said, you know, the secret wish of the lyric poet is to stop time. And I love that idea that the poem, this tiny, small thing, actually does have the possibility to do that as a reader. When I read a poem, I cannot race at it in full speed and just race through to arrive at meaning. I have to slow down time. I have to enter the time of the poem. And then, you know, there is a possibility that you are in a kind of timelessness when you read the poem. And then, you know, the poem can also stay within you. So there's so many angles to that. But I think poetry is probably, yeah, in terms of, you know, its elasticity of all of the forms the most, because of its distillation and its size, I think.
Thank you so much, both. And I'm going to come out in just a second, as I said, to the audience for questions. But another thing that I think really deeply connects the work of both these poets and that we heard tonight in the readings is the engagement, the kind of very direct engagement with the poem, with politics and with the state, and kind of both the previous crimes of the state that the poem can kind of rewrite or attempt to speak back to, and also the contemporary political moment, as we heard. And I sometimes think that there's a perception, I guess, that poetry can't do those things, and then we read both these books and we hear poets like this and we remind, no, it can. It can speak back to power, it can use the language of the state back on the state, and it can be involved in these contemporary political moments. And we've thought a lot about, I guess, time, but also this sense of kind of drawing on these different spaces, but also there are very contemporary kind of important moments that are addressed in both these collections and across the body of both your work. And I just wonder for you, if each of you could say a little bit about that, about just how you feel, I guess, either your role as the poet in relation to the state and politics, but also how you attempt to address that within the writing and within these collections.
Yes, I am aware that the poems I've written have a kind of public dimension to them, and they might be called political poems. At the same time, they feel very personal, and they feel like family poems, and they feel like sometimes the only language I have of figuring out a kind of intergenerational wound in my own family. But I suppose I'm more or less agree with, that there's a beautiful essay by Audre Lorde, poetry is not a luxury. That poetry is a space by which we name our thoughts, and we have to do that before we can turn those that language into tangible action, and so I think poets have an important contribution. They can be in a kind of a conversation with change makers. I certainly feel very close to the tradition of poetry in Ireland, where the poet was always a recorder of social history, was a satirist, petitioner. When the poet of medieval times finished their training, they were given a bird feather cloak, to show that they were both of the other world and close to the magical, but of this world as well. And I think it's the lovely thing about poetry is that you can kind of again weave between these kind of states of being.
I was going to say, I think that's a really important point about the status of the poet in Ireland. The status of the poet in England is something to be kind of dismissed or put out like the bins on every Thursday, I guess, the poet in England. But the poet in Ireland still has, I think, as you say, the status and the history of the poet in Ireland that's really important to remember. Sorry,
yeah,
Tishani.
I think that's so lovely to hear. I think traditionally in India, the poet was a very magical creature. The word, one of the words for poet was kavi, and that is the seer, somebody who sees, so somebody who can prophesy, somebody who is a kind of almost like a wandering saint. So there's a whole tradition, and also there was this thing coming back to language and the orality of poetry, of when the word was uttered, it could make the thing happen. So it was so powerful that if you said it, it would be. And then you hear about all these sort of historical these poets and the kind of the position they had. Then you hear about the relationship of the poet to the courts, and it's the position of the poet has been changing, but now we are in the position, at least I would say, where the poet is not in any of those realms. And I would say in India, particularly, a poet who writes in English is really, on the lower rung of things. But I wonder, I never think myself of the role of the poet. Are you okay? Do you need water? Can we get some? Yeah. So I think this sense of, the responsibility or the role, that's not really something that I think of when I write a poem. I'm writing because I the poem is demanding to be written, and I'm excited about a poem appearing, so I go to write it. And then you have a collection, and then as I'm writing it, I'm figuring out, what is this collection about, And so I don't really have that big picture idea when I go into things. But certainly I think that poetry has the capacity to speak to the moment that we are living, and it always has, and poets have always been writing about the times they live in, and writing universal poems that are out of time, and this whole idea of the political and the personal being this space from which we draw. I think it's, again, I don't know that it's so easy to do it in other forms. Like, I don't think that we've seen the great COVID pandemic novel or I feel that fiction requires a much longer gestation period from which something will emerge. The 9/11 novel, the pandemic novel, whatever. The madness of the Donald Trump years novel. And yet I think that poets can write very quickly and very powerfully to everything that's going on, from the absurd to the horrific to the beautiful. And so, this is the small perk of being a poet.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to both of them. We've just got time for a couple of questions, I was saying, from the audience, if people have got anything that they would like to ask all of these poets. If not, I can just carry on chatting to them all night, really. Yes, just there. We had a roving mic, but I think just use your, what I call, assembly voice, and we'll be fine.
I'll try. Leading on from what you were just saying with the kind of immediacy of poetry, I was wondering if you think that that means that the poet has a responsibility to kind of capture the moment more so than other artists.
So I'll just repeat that for the online one as well. So given the immediacy of poetry, does that mean the poet has more of responsibility than other artists to kind of speak to or capture the contemporary moment?
I'm very, very wary of the word responsibility. I kind of dislike it. And I don't think that poets have historically been responsible creatures in general. However, that said, I do think that I do look to the poets, and not so much from a sense of responsibility, but because I do feel that there is this quickness, this ability to hold the things that don't seem to fit together, the horrors and the beauty, in a way that is very strong. But in terms of responsibility, I don't know. I don't know that is where the creation starts from, because there are many, many other people who are doing wonderful vocations where there is a different social contract in terms of responsibility and what they are doing with the public. And I'm not sure that, maybe with some poets it's very clear, but I think that's probably, at least I speak for myself, not the initial, that is not my contract with poetry.
Yeah, I think the only responsibility is to discover something, or at least that's what I hold in my mind when I'm writing. I keep writing the poem until something comes up through the plumb line of the subconscious that I had not expected, and I'm either surprised or elated or embarrassed or discomforted. But that's where my focus lies, I suppose, when I'm writing a poem. Yeah.
Maybe time for one more question if anyone's got one somewhere in the audience. Yes, just there.
First of all, I just want to say it's been a wonderful night, and I really appreciated hearing both of your work. My question is, I wonder if you feel that poetry serves as a type of a medicine to heal collective wounds.
And again, I'll repeat that for the online one as well. So this question about kind of poetry's ability, I guess, or as a medicine, to use the language of the question, to heal collective wounds. I think it's a fascinating question. Thank you. Annemarie, shall I go to you first?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I certainly think of poetry as a bit of a time travel, and it gives me some grasp over the past. And it gives me the ability sometimes to change the past, in that I can look back through the lens of the poem and I can change my understanding of the past. I can also look forward as well, and the poems can be strangely prophetic, or they can allow you to really root yourself in the present. And maybe I'm kind of striving sometimes to have a cathartic moment or to heal something, but I'm not sure that happens in the long run. It's also very discomforting, as any of you know here, if you're sitting and writing and failing and trying and dragging yourself back to the page again, and your partner is sitting looking to go, why are you doing this to yourself? It's and you have to. It's quite tricky, difficult work as well sometimes. So I'm not sure. I do think there's something. I really liked what you said about the magical qualities of language and the power of words to create change. So I am interested in enchantment, through language, and in that kind of time travel. But I almost have to, and I hope maybe that something healing might happen for me. But I have to relieve myself of that responsibility, and definitely I have to be very aware when I'm putting work out into the world that I'm putting it out because it's a poem, and I hope that it can be a companion text to somebody. But I must kind of also be wary of trying to write something that I think is going to heal somebody else, But sorry, that's a very tangled answer to your brilliant question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that people reading your poems have a way to access something, because the poem is articulating those gaps and around those silences. I was at a festival many years ago in Cornwall, and there was somebody who had a sort of Freudian couch, and people would come and tell their problems, and he would prescribe a poem. So if you're despondent, or you've broken up with somebody, or you can't sleep at night, and he had 20 different poems. So now the poetry pharmacy, and people were weeping, and so this question of the poem feeding the soul in a way, or what's the poem that you need? I think poems can act as a kind of spell, to come back to the idea of enchantment, but they also physically can alter something inside and in your brain. I think the poems that we carry, that we learn, for instance, I love to learn poems because I feel that then I own the poem, and so I had to learn Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, but now that's my poem, not just Frost's poem, and I can bring it up anytime I want. And so there's a kind of, again, you can't memorize a whole novel, but you can memorize a poem that you love, and then that poem is yours, and you carry it like a prayer almost. And we know then that it's not so much about meaning when you hear or you repeat a prayer again and again, or you say something. It is simply a syllabic magic that's happening, and it's something about the words that are doing something. Of course they have a meaning, and the meaning is a layer, but it's just this wash, and and I think that shift can bring you into a different state. So I think incantation and sort of that sonic power of poetry does have a transformative capability, let's say.
Thank you so much to you both, and thank you for those brilliant questions as well. We'll be, of course, I was saying, selling books at the back, so do hang around, have another drink, explore the brilliant exhibition, explore the stacks and shelves of Manchester Poetry Library, and both Tishani and Annemarie's books are for sale at the back, so do stop by and get copies of those, not least because I've learned how to sell books through my iPhone in the last 10 minutes, so I can now sell Annemarie's books on her behalf, which is fantastic. So don't let that work be in vain. But no, thank you all so much for coming, and just thank you for these incredibly insightful and generous answers alongside these remarkable readings. So please just join me one last time in thanking both our readers, Annemarie Curran and Tishani Doshi. Thank you.